Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before I get into it with our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Caroline Waterwall on the podcast. She's an NPC bikini competitor coming to us all the way from the great state of Texas, where, I don't even want to ask what the weather's like because it's just going to depress me. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Caroline, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I got to ask, first of all, because I do love torturing myself, what is the weather like in Texas today?
It's not cold by any means, but it's just rainy and muggy, and it's not great. There's no sun, so at least you have that.
It's the world's smallest violin I have for the Texas people out there that are suffering, because it is like 10 degrees here and it's snowing, and it's going to get even worse. We're going to get like to negative 20 probably by late January. That's usually when that happens. But before I depress everyone with that, Caroline, why don't you give us your backstory on what really inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that led to becoming like a bikini competitor and all the way that it's taken you.
Yeah. So I guess I've always been active. My family's always been super active. I was a competitive swimmer for most of my like younger years. So there's always been that competitiveness in me. After I stopped swimming competitively, it's a hard hobby to be into and not have a pool available and a team available. So once I got out of that, I transitioned into running. They're very similar to me as far as cardio aspects go. And so I went into marathon, half marathon training, and kind of dabbled in the gym a little bit. It wasn't a huge priority to me. And then it slowly kind of transitioned to where the cardio got less and the weight training got more. And everybody would always ask me whenever I was in the gym, it's like kind of a pickup line for people. Hey, do you compete? And it's like, no. And honestly, I had no idea that people even did this. This was in like 2018, whenever people started asking me. And I was like, I don't know what y'all are talking about. Competing in what? And so I kind of had um, a slump, I guess you can say, in the gym, because at that point, you kind of go into the gym, you are just doing whatever you feel like doing that day, and you hit a rut, right? Um, and then at that time, well, I can kind of go into that later, but I was also not feeding myself properly in order to see results, right? That's a huge thing that females have. They want to restrict their calories, increase their cardio, and have a thin physique, which is its own goal, right? So as I was making that transition of increasing my time in the gym, I was like, why am I not seeing results? I kind of need to do something else. And I'm also very goal motivated. So I was like, all right, let's give this whole thing that people are talking about competing a try. And then it just kind of spiraled out from there.
Yeah, that's awesome. And one thing that the moment that you said swimmer, I was like, oh God, swimmer's back, because I dated an ex swimmer, and it's hugging them is basically like hugging a tree, basically, where you just got to really wrap around. But yeah, and then running too. So cardio is my least favorite thing on the planet. I hate it more than life itself. So anytime I ever run around, I was like, oh God, what sort of mental illness did they fall out of a tree from to do that? But I always told this funny story with that same ex girlfriend. She ran too. So you're basically like the same person where she would always come up to me and say, hey, you want to go for a run or whatever? Easiest answer in my life, no. I even told her, I said, the only time you're ever going to see me run is you have to chase me with a knife. That's the only time that you're really ever going to see me run. But, hey, but that's just so awesome. But when you were getting started, obviously you had like you said, you had no really idea about what competing was. But when you found out about it, was there any reservations that you had about doing it? Because, it's a lifestyle that once you get into it, it's very, very hard. And it's a lot harder than what most people, I think, associate bodybuilding with.
Right. My reservations are more so because the people that I talked to within my circle all had, they had a friend of a friend who had an eating disorder from bodybuilding or had a negative experience with bodybuilding. So everything that I had coming into it was a lot of negative comments. So even as I was going into it, I was very skeptical, and I was just like, you know what, I just want to be jacked. And my definition of jacked was completely different. Like I wanted to have abs, like solid abs. That's all I wanted going into it. And I actually had signed up for the Mountains to Beach half marathon the following May. So this was in 2019 May, after my first competition. So I was like, I'm not going to go down this deep dark rabbit hole because everybody comes out of it with eating disorders, and I already had one of my own that I was dealing with. So I was like, I'm just going to go through this, um, you know, get leaned out, and then go back into my normal routine. So that way, I can not, get involved with all of this negativity. Which, to my surprise at the time, which now it's not surprising to me at all, but it is nothing like what outside perspectives have. They have this perception that you go into it, you don't eat anything, and again, you just have an eating disorder, and they associate it with anorexia, right? Because it's you're not eating anything. But for me, it gave me a ton of knowledge, and it changed my overall goals and my perception about so many things. So I was binging and purging. So that was my eating disorder that I was dealing with. And on top of it, I was just like, well, I had a horrible meal. I'm going to go run 6 to 9 miles and then it'll all be like it never happened. Um, and so I was already going into it with a poor perception of diet anyways, and how you would be able to see goals at the end of it and how to build muscle. So, that first 6 months was just really just redefining what a healthy lifestyle looks like. And so for me, coming out of bodybuilding, coming out of that season, it completely changed everything that I knew at the time about how to live a healthy lifestyle. So those were my reservations going into bodybuilding. I did not think it was going to be hard at all to perform. And that, I guess, is another thing that I had a misconception about because I was just like, oh, I'm just going to go in and work out. And I don't, the diet's not going to be hard. I'm just going to go and I'm just going to be on stage. And yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing that we hear of all the time too from people in the general public who don't understand. Like I was telling you before, that they just think, oh, it's just working out and then going on stage and posing. But there's so much more to that. But a thing that I love to bring up is that if you were to walk into a gym with 100 people, there's 100 different ways as to how those people got into shape. Whether it's what amount of reps they do, what exercise they do, their cardio, their nutrition, their diet. I mean, so many little things add up to that overall package that people end up seeing. What was that experience like for you? Because if you were to walk up to someone and say, like, hey, what'd you train for this body part? It looks amazing. What works best for them 99% of the time isn't going to work as good for you. And it's just so much trial and error to figure out what works best for your body.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to what you enjoy. A lot of people do like that hypertrophy type of weightlifting. I personally love being given my numbers by my coach and hitting certain percentages of my max lift. So I like going into the gym knowing exactly what I'm going to be doing and hitting that specific number. Right now, I'm going through a training block of an upper body day, a lower body day, and so that's going to be strength days and then 2 hypertrophy days and accessory day. I really, really enjoy this type of workout because I know exactly what I'm going in for. I know the numbers that I need to hit in order to increase my strength and therefore increase my muscle mass. So I like that type of workout. I know plenty of people who go in there and they're just like, I want to lift as heavy as I can that day. And again, like you said, there's so many different ways to receive results, which is something that I love so much about this industry, about just fitness in general, is that it's all about what makes you happiest, and everybody has a different goal. So, there's a lot of different avenues that you can take. I personally like this one.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and it's not even like with the weight training too. I mean, people can get in shape doing all types of things. I mean, like yoga, you can do cardio. I mean, cardio, good luck with that though. But I mean, it's just so many people just associate one way of being the one way to do it, where it's like, no, there's so many different ways to accomplish this. But also, when you were getting started, I mean, a myth that I love to bust in this podcast, I busted every single episode, and it's gotten better the last 5 years due to Instagram, is the fear that a lot of women have, that if they walk into the gym and they pick up one dumbbell, they're going to put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight. Which, I mean, first of all, if I had that type of self-confidence, I would be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company by now. So, hopefully, I eventually acquire that. But first of all, that is not going to happen. And if it does happen to you, you'll be the first ever trillionaire, because everybody and their brother would want to, spend whatever amount. I'd spend my entire life savings just to train with you once then. But did you ever have that fear when you were getting started? And even if you didn't, I mean, I bet you still hear that all the time. How do you like to respond to that?
Um, yeah, no, I didn't have that fear necessarily, but again, at the time, whenever I started, I was wanting to stay small. I didn't really think that lifting weights was gonna make me bulky. But yeah, that is definitely one of the answers that I tell people whenever they say that. It's like, you have to try so hard in order to gain muscle. So it's not the actual reality of the situation. And then whenever they look at like a bodybuilder like me, we're in bikini, so we're the smallest of the bodybuilders. So it's, and then they just associate it with how much work that I'm putting in. I'm not getting manly or jacked that way. So it's just a more so I can testify to it. Like, no, I promise you, we're not going to get huge. You'll have a more feminine shape because you can actually put on an that is muscle. and and then too, I think the main thing is that I receive as far as weightlifting and getting muscular. A lot of girls don't like to train their back. And so that's what I hear the most. And they're like, why do you, so much back work? And for me, it's easy to say, if you want a tiny waist, you gotta have a bigger back.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's just so many things that people just don't understand about it. And, I always tell them, it's like, what's the worst thing? You're going to get in shape then. That's the worst thing that's going to happen to you in your mind if you think that that's going to happen. But also, I mean, tone is the worst word I've ever heard in my entire life. I hate it whenever people use it because it's like, when you're saying tone, you're saying muscle, but you're saying it in a way that you think that it doesn't mean muscle. But it's like, oh, I just want to get toned. Where you're like, oh, really? So what does that mean for you? Oh, I just want to lose some fat. And I was like, oh, so what's going to be underneath that? Do you just want to be skin and bones, basically? Because there are ways that you can do that, but it doesn't involve working out. But yeah, I mean, it's just something that really doesn't. I don't know. I just don't get it at times, But
But and then to your point, it is really, really great to see the change in the community that's happening. The knowledge is out there for people. All they have to do is just go look for it, and just even just like the surface level, they will learn something about that. So that's what's really, really great, is that just this information is now being available to people, and it's changing people's perspectives about fitness.
Absolutely. And one thing that I like to add on to that is because I think it's one thing that affects women so much more than it does men. It affects men as well, but it's just that confidence boost that working out gives you. I mean, we've heard hundreds of stories on this podcast of women who have, made life-changing decisions. It's maybe helped them become more assertive, or it's just one thing that I think you can take from the gym and use to impact every single aspect of your life. How have you personally taken that confidence boost that working out's given you and use it to impact your life in a positive way?
Yeah. I'm gonna go back to my eating disorder that I had before. It really is a self love issue that I experienced with my eating disorder. I was trying to maintain this weird little lifestyle in order to, fit a certain criteria so that I felt loved. Right? Like, if I look this way, I know that I will have love from my peers because I look a certain way, right? And it's a weird mental disorder that you have to overcome. And so for me, bodybuilding has replaced that need for outward love. And I can now give myself all of the love that I need because of the self confidence that I've developed from bodybuilding. And it's definitely helped me overcome a a huge eating disorder that I had. So I will say that um, it always kind of comes back, right? That eating disorder, it is a disorder, so you have to be on top of it at all times. Even just a few months ago, I felt myself kind of slipping a little bit, and it creeps up on you whenever you least expect it, and you kind of always are going to be dealing with it. But bodybuilding for me has, again, just laid down a huge solid foundation for me and knowledge that really helps for me.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think so many people, like you're talking about, with all those myths that you heard or experiences were like, oh, they became, they had more eating disorders, or they did that. It's like, for every one of those, I think with bodybuilding, there's like 10 more of them that have positive relationships that they get from it. And I think, people just focus more on the negative stories. So, and that's with a lot of things in life too, where you're going to hear about, if anything, I know some people that if I ever told them I got a car and started to drive, they'd be like, oh, people die in car crashes. I'd be like, oh, okay. I mean, yeah, so yeah, that's just something that you really, I think a lot of people deal with. But I love to talk genetics on this podcast because so many people are on, social media this day and age, and oh my God, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back. People just don't understand that you can only be the best version of yourself. And I don't know how many times I have to shake people down and just be like, you don't know what that person did to get to that look. You don't know how hard they trained. You don't know what they sacrificed when it comes to their nutrition, or all the manipulations that the body goes through when it comes to bodybuilding. But on top of that, whenever someone first gets started working out, everyone always has that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And then everyone has that one body part that just lags behind it. They have to train to death to get it to catch up. I mean, my back, I had to train into overdrive. No, I didn't have to train to overdrive because that was the body part that really, really took off for me because I worked in warehouses all the time. But I still trained it into overdrive just because, I like doing it, but that's my body part that took off. And then my legs, because I'm 6'3", so my lower body is just absolutely shot. Where I mean, I could train legs every day. I always said I could inject pure muscle into my legs and they wouldn't grow an ounce. I'm just one of those weird people. Don't even get me started on calves. That's the number one pet peeve. Where it's just like I could do 10,000 calf lifts a day and they wouldn't even gain a centimeter. So, but what were those body parts for you when you were getting started?
Um, as far as my legs just are are nice. And it goes down to why are you shaking your head?
I hate it when guests have it because legs are my worst pet peeve. So then
Uh,
when everyone says legs, I was like, oh God, those lucky
yeah,
bastards.
but I out to like all of the running that I did, it really set a nice foundation for my muscle. Now, there's a point. My legs are nice. My ass is small because of all of the running that I did. It just, it completely took any ass away from me. But my legs are really nice, and yeah, my right now my favorite body part is my quads. My quads have grown exponentially because too, whenever I was beginning weight training, like I would just do an overall leg day and not a quad focus day. So once I saw like quad separation starting to happen, I was like, oh man, this is great. I want to train these every day. And as far as what doesn't necessarily grow as well, is going to be my upper body. I've been blessed with genetically like broad shoulders, so that really helps me. But as far as like the muscle definition in my delts, that's really really hard for me to come to build. And then two, I also constantly am dealing with small injuries up here too. So that really puts a damper on my muscle growth. But at the same time, it's nice that I at least have broad shoulders to pretend like I have larger delts.
Well, and plus that swimming must have, helped out a lot too when it came to at least the shoulders and delts, just because it does add a little bit of something. So at least there's something from that. But I mean, I love asking that question because so many people have so many different answers, and it really just helps me prove to a lot of people that it's like everyone's different. You're never going to get the same results as someone else. But nutrition is one thing that, I mean, it's 80 to 90% of this lifestyle, and so many people don't realize that. I still have some friends who, God bless them, think that they can go at Burger King, 3 times a week, and they'll still be in shape as long as they work out. And I tell them, I was like, yeah, because we're 25, maybe you might be able to, but call me in 10 years and see how that works. But what were some of the biggest nutritional changes that you made when you really started to put on weight and size for bodybuilding?
Yeah. Once I got like really serious about it, I realized that I'm gonna have to stop focusing on those cheat meals so much. So before it was more so just instead of focusing on like, oh, I'm gonna be clean all week and then I'm gonna have that cheat meal at the end and I'm gonna go balls to the wall and I'm just gonna down that whole thing. Now, occasionally I super still do that, but I don't focus on it as much, which is a huge transition from what I thought it was going to be. So in my early bodybuilding, um, it was mainly a focus of that. It was like I'm gonna be clean, 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 and I'm just gonna wait until I can get that cheat meal, and I'm gonna really savor it and just so. But now the transition for me is like it's 100% a lifestyle. If I want to obtain the goals that I have for myself, I have to stop focusing on these silly things and get my what's the word? The what is it?
Per goals or
It's
achievements?
I have to get my priorities in line.
Priorities. Okay, yeah, yeah.
Yes, my priorities are gonna have to stop focusing, like stop being food. And again, it goes back to that relationship with food that I had before. So it's an ever evolving thing that I have with diet for
Yeah.
sure.
And that's, that's a big part of it. And, so many people are different with their diets too. It's just like with working out, where it's like everyone's different. I mean, some people, and plus there are 1,000 new diets that are invented every day. So that's what makes it really hard for so many people to really gauge what the best one is. But now we go into cardio, which I told you before, I hate more than life itself. But what is your relationship with cardio like now that you're a competitor? I hope that you're not running as much as you were in your marathon days.
No, I'm not. Unfortunately, I still have that love of cardio. I love a cardio high. It's nothing is ever going to be a cardio high ever. And so it kind of transitioned. Whenever I go into my cutting phases, definitely weighted stairs is what I absolutely love to do. I would do it every single day if I could, but obviously that's not gonna get me to the goals that I want to do. So there's sacrificing for sure that I have to do right now is just walking on an incline. But man, I really, really am itching to to get that sweat going. I love cardio, and yeah, I am definitely um, the like not what you normally see in bodybuilding. Most friends don't like cardio, so
Which is why I like having most bodybuilders on, because they tend to agree with that. But no, when I say cardio too, I mean I can walk on a treadmill for like 2 hours and get, like 11 miles in. Like that's completely fine with me. Like that's stuff that I don't care. When I'm saying cardio, I mean like running. So yeah, whenever I say cardio, I'm not referring, because like I go on walks on treadmills all the time, and I love bike rides. That's my the one form of cardio that like I really enjoy. So when I say cardio, I mean basically just running. But yeah, there's more ways to do your cardio than just to run, and there's ways that I think everyone can at least enjoy a part of it. But one of the most important things, well, actually, in my opinion, it's the most important thing when it comes to, health and fitness and your overall life in general, is sleep. And it's not talked about nearly as much as it should be. I mean, it's one of those things where I'm just like, why is nobody really, preaching this as much? Because if anyone tells me that, oh, sleep's not that much of a big deal, pull an all-nighter and then go and work out and then tell me how that works out. I did that twice in college and I lasted halfway through. But what is your relationship with sleep like? Because so many people in this day and age, they struggle with it due to technology or just due to, what's going on in the world right now. Are you struggling at all to get that proper amount of sleep? And even if you aren't, are there any ways that you incorporate to get that proper amount? Because so many people, I mean, just struggle with it a lot. And I think if they found a way on how to do it properly, it would really benefit them.
yeah. I don't struggle with it, but it's definitely a priority to me. I absolutely love my sleep, and I make sure that I'm getting as much sleep as I need. As far as how I go about it, I'm making sure that I'm winding down in a good amount of time. For me personally, I feel like the amount of energy that I'm exerting throughout my day gets me to a point where I am physically tired by the end of the day. I think that's a huge point. And I would say, as far as in bodybuilding, it's probably because of things that we are supplementing into our life that is preventing us to have good sleep. We're putting our bodies through a lot of stress. So it's keeping us up at night. And then two, there's a huge what caffeine addiction that we have within bodybuilding too. So I feel like that's another huge factor. Our hormones are being messed with constantly, so that's another huge factor. So being in tune with those things that you have going on in your life is going to definitely help you eventually get to a place of better sleep. Now, outside of bodybuilding, I feel like it's more people are not exerting themselves enough. So people who are not physically active, by the end of their day, they've had this huge calorie surplus, but they haven't expended any energy from it. So they have a lot of pent up energy that they haven't been able to release. So their body's not tired. Now, for me, I wake up, around like 4 a.m. or so. So it's like by like 8 p.m. I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm ready to go to bed. So that's my relationship with it.
Yeah, I'm a night owl, so I'm going to bed sometimes around like 3 or 4. So sometimes you're getting up by the time I'm going to sleep. But I used to work nights too before the pandemic and the lockdowns too. So that was another reason why. But yeah, I mean sleep. It's just don't underestimate it, because good luck to you if you don't get that problem. And we hear that all the time too with the caffeine addiction. We're like some of these bodybuilders are only getting like 3 to 4 hours of sleep for months at a time. And, it's just like, good God, yeah, I would be addicted to caffeine too as well. But the number one thing that I would have never guessed in a million years that, you know, before I started this podcast, I knew about it, but I didn't know how hard it was, is that for so many of these competitors, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than your nutrition. It's harder than the working out. I like to compare it now to being a perfect driver, where you can be a great driver. You can never be a perfect driver. You can be a great poser. You can never be a perfect poser. It's always ever evolving. What has your personal experience with posing been like?
Gosh, it's just such a challenge. I don't have the a great amount of like lower back flexibility for bikinis for me to be able to twist appropriately and enough. So it really is a huge challenge for me in order to hit that front pose well. So that's for me my struggles with it, but I think it's fun and I think that I do it every day. So
What's your experience like with those damn high heels that they make you guys wear?
that's easy stuff.
Hey, well, I've had some guests on where that's the main reason they move from figure to physique, because they say, I don't want to wear those heels anymore. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm pretty comfortable in the heels. They're comfortable enough, and they are acrylic stage heels, so they are made to be moved in.
That is true. And when you're walking on that stage, what does that feel like for you when you get to walk on there and you've worked months upon months on this physique? What is that feeling like when you finally get to present that on stage?
I felt good going into my last shows. I've only competed once, and again, I was coming off of marathon and half marathon training and a huge calorie deficit. So um, going into my first show, I was happy with my physique. I was really happy with my placements as well. But from there, I was like looking at these girls on stage. I was like, holy shit! Like, I am so small. And that was in August 2019. So I've taken a solid year to be building it up to this point. Now I feel like the next time I go on stage, I am going to be so extremely proud of what I've built. And again, going on stage last time, you get a huge high. Like it's exciting. You feel beautiful, and you get to show off what work you've put in. But it's gonna be nothing compared to how I feel going on stage next time. Being able to say, I built this. I didn't just like whittle the physique that I had down. I literally built this physique. And now I'm showcasing what I put into this year.
Yeah, that is so awesome. And it sort of leads me into another myth that I love to bust. And, so many people have that belief that, that look that you present on stage is a sustainable look. And it's not. It's not a sustainable look in any way, shape, or sense of the form. Now, some people try to, maintain that look year round, and it leads to a lot of health problems. And, their careers usually tend to go short. But what was that like for you when you first realized, like, hey, this look that I present on stage, I'm not going to be able to maintain it? Was it easy for you, or was it harder for you to sort of let go of that look?
Um, Definitely hard. After your first show, there's so much learning of like, oh, this is what off season's actually gonna look like now. So I definitely didn't have the expectation to keep that physique. But I did not think that I was gonna go down the spiral of like negative food relationship that I did. So post show, I had a solid 2 months of being a complete a-hole. And I got, fluffy enough to where I was uncomfortable. And by everybody else's standards, of course, they're like, no, you look fine, you look good. And, that's not what you want to hear. You don't want to hear anything about it actually. But so from that point, I went through a calorie deficit again just to get me to a better body fat percentage that I was more comfortable with so that I could go into a nice off season and actually um, enjoy the way that I look with the added body fat, of course, because it's still a beautiful look at whatever phase that your body's in. But to a place that I was content and happy with going forward. So, and from there, of course, there's a little bit of like body image that I had to deal with myself. But it definitely leads to a place of loving yourself in all phases. So that's what I've gathered from adding body fat on post show. Um, Now I am somewhat, I prefer to lean bulk. So I don't put on a ton of weight. But again, I'm competing in bikinis, so I don't need to be, getting huge or anything like that. So it makes it a little bit easier to do a lean bulk, but it's definitely Depending on what your goals are, you can really, back to our conversation whenever we were saying that getting that goal, you can do it a number of ways. For me, I want to let people know that if you don't want to get to a body fat that you just do are not comfortable with, you don't have to. That was one thing that some earlier coaches that I talked to, they were like, "Yeah, you're gonna be in a really uncomfortable place. You're gonna have a fair amount of body fat on you, and I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want to do that." And at the same time, like I have other things in my life that prevent me from adding on too much body fat. Um, like I do some modeling, so I need to have a physique that is pretty similar throughout the year, right? I can't go up and then down that drastically. So it's definitely doable. It's hard, but it's a route that if you want to do it that way, you definitely can. So that for me, I try to let girls who are interested know, because that was another myth, I guess you can say that every girl that I know that did a bodybuilding competition, now she's really really fluffy and she doesn't look anything like that. I'm just like, well, back to your point, um, stage lean is not something that you maintain, and two, it doesn't have to be that type of bulk. So
I mean, I know some people when they're in off season, they don't even look like they've ever worked out a day in their life, and then and then you're like, oh wow, you're a bodybuilder, and I've had some of them on the show where I was like, oh wow, and then it just shows, some people are different, and some people, they do put on that huge amount of weight in the. I mean, we've heard stories on here of like 40 pounds in like 2 weeks, and it's like, yeah, it's something that you really gotta watch out for. But stress is one thing that I mean people do not talk about as much as it needs to be when it comes to gaining weight or just body image. How do you deal with stress? Because I mean, being that you all are also a model and a bodybuilder too. I mean, that stress that people have during preps, I mean, is something that's very underrepresented, I think. But how do you manage to deal with all that? Because stress can really do a number on your body.
yeah, most definitely. It's for sure prioritizing sleep, and then prioritizing things in your life that are extra frills. And that's something that bodybuilding does. No matter how far or how deep into it you go, bodybuilding lets you know what's important to you and what to prioritize. So removing there's going to be some things that you remove from your life to reduce stress and to make the rest of your life easier, if this is a goal that you have. So that's going to be a huge thing. um Sleep, prioritizing, yeah, those two
Yeah,
things.
that's I mean, again, that is an absolute huge one. But now we go to the big elephant in the room. It's the coronavirus, because it's one thing that's impacted all of our lives in more ways than we could have ever imagined. I mean, the gyms are still shut down here in Minnesota. They got re-shut down in November, and they're until it looks like till the end of January. But what is your personal experience with the coronavirus been like? Because so many people, I mean, it's just especially for bodybuilding too, with all the gyms being shut down and everything, especially early on. I mean, a lot of people struggled with it. But what was your personal journey like during this?
I was actually pretty blessed through coronavirus. I was able to um have gym equipment available to me. Honestly, back to like reducing stress, coronavirus, everything shut down, so it removed almost everything. So I was able to just work out, not be, tempted with happy hours or dinners with friends. I could literally just eat clean, work out, and go to work. And I got jacked as am I allowed to say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll bleep it out, but people will know what you said.
Okay, but yeah. Um, so yeah, corona and quarantine were fine for me, thankfully, and I'm really really blessed and for for the way that that came out.
Did you have to do any home workouts, or were there gyms that you could kind of get into, or
Um, I did some home workouts. I had some weights available to me, so whenever it was convenient or whenever it was inconvenient to go to the places that like garage gyms and things that I had available to me, if I didn't have those, then I was able to work out from home. But mainly it was garage type things. But yeah.
yeah, yeah, and that's one thing that a lot of people have, you know, been able to do as well. But now a question that I love to ask, because especially during coronavirus where people have more free time than they've ever had, and one of the excuses that I hear all the time from people who don't or when I ask them if they want to get in shape is, I wish I could, but I just don't have the time. Where it's like, if you have that excuse now, I want to know what's going on in your life because everyone has more free time now. But if someone were to walk up to you and say, Caroline, I just want to get in shape and, I just don't know how to, what would be your best advice for them just to get started? Because I find for so many people, just taking that first step makes everything so much easier.
Yeah, no, start with the small things. So if you're coming from literally square one, you've never worked out a day in your life, then I would say the first thing is going to be start with something easy that is not gym related. Um, can you get a gallon of water in a day? If you can do that for a week, then let's start making sure that you are hitting X amount of protein per day. So start with those things first before you even start stepping into the gym. Yes, be active um, within that time frame, and then get outside for 30 minutes a day. Let's start there before you tackle the gym because that's whenever things are I feel like people get a little scared. And then from there it's just a developing a habit. Yeah, just
Yeah, there are those studies that it takes like 40 to 60 days to really develop a habit. So you really got to get onto that. And also just go for a walk too. I mean, that's the easiest thing that you can do. If you're able bodied, just go for a walk. It's one of the best things for you. It's good for your heart. It's good for all those things. It's one of the best things that you can do. And notice how I said not run, go for a walk. Because if you go for a run, yeah, go for a walk, start up. Don't be like some of my friends and go full Rambo and go to the gym and train for like 5 hours a day for like 3 straight days. And they're like, oh, I'm done. I'm done working out. And it's like, well, yeah, because you went hardcore balls to the wall right in the very beginning when your body's not used to it. So that's a whole different, yeah.
that's the other thing about bodybuilding too is that whenever people say that they're like, well, I couldn't devote myself like that and I wouldn't be able to do the diet and the workouts. It's just so much to do. And you grow into it, right? It's not I didn't just go from, running 6 miles to weight training every day overnight. Like it's definitely a slow process and you start weeding out things that from the previous way of doing things so that you can make room for new things. And once you hit a certain point that you feel like you have mastered that level, then you add in something else. So it's definitely a growing process, and you have to grow with it. It's not just an overnight thing that happens.
Yeah. Well, and I gotta ask, how do you deal with rest days too? Because that's one thing that a lot of people that are bodybuilders struggle with. Because, yep, see, we get that reaction almost every time where it's like, yeah, that is one thing where, I mean, if you're that in tune with your working out, where it's like that one day when you're forced to just sit at home really and just do something else. I mean, I've had times, I'm like that with this podcast and with working out, where if I'm not doing a podcast thing related in a day, whether it's editing a podcast or doing one or, publishing a podcast, I feel kind of broken where I'm like, I gotta be doing something. Like, gotta be active. So, how do you deal with that mentally so that you're not driving yourself crazy?
Mm. Today's my rest day. It was horrible.
Well, at least we were able to take at least an hour of your time away from you, so you
Yeah,
don't have to worry
right.
about it. Yeah.
I try to honestly, the past 2 weeks I've been really bad about having a rest day, but because I'll sneak and say I'll go and I'll go and I'll just like walk on the treadmill for a little bit just to like get my gym fix in. This is kind of how it's been going lately for me. But I actually took a real life rest day today. I did not go to the gym, but I try to remind myself that the recovery is going to help my muscle growth. And the more recovery days I take, the bigger my muscles are going to be, is literally what I tell myself. So,
That is a great way to put it, and I couldn't have put it better myself too. But two of the questions that I love to ask before we wrap things up is, if someone were to walk up to you and say, Caroline, we made the decision, you can change one thing about the sport of bodybuilding and everyone would go along with it, what would be one thing that you would like to see changed?
uh, as far okay, so one thing is for people to stop talking about other people's food. That is really annoying for me. And I guess it's more so outside of bodybuilding, people outwardly talking about bodybuilders' food on the inside. If I could change that, man, that'd be so great. Um, it's like, oh, you're having egg whites again? Yes, I'm having egg whites. And actually, I super love egg whites. So,
Well, I personally got to a point where I was eating too many egg whites where now my stomach doesn't do so well when I eat them. So now I don't eat as much as I can because I went like 3 straight years when I was in college where I would eat, egg whites every single day.
wow,
Yeah.
I need to look into that. That I love egg whites. And then the other thing that I would change about bodybuilding is just the judgment criteria. I wish that it was a little bit more, across the board. Every Texas show this year, the bikini girl has looked so different. And it's just like, can y'all just narrow it down? I feel like they really made it very clear um, at the pro level what it is that they're looking for in a bikini physique. But at these national and regional level shows, they are all over the place. And it's not setting up these girls for, you know, obtaining that pro card goal. And then two, it's just like, well, why am I going to compete here? Because then it's just a whatever you feel like looks good that day. And how am I supposed to meet your criteria if it's changing at every show? Like I need a little bit of structure, guys. Come on.
Well, absolutely, and I mean, it's just like with all the sports that there's human error in it. And trust me, being a baseball pitcher, I know all about human error. Some of those damn umps that I had to deal with, but yeah, it's just yeah. I wish that they would come up with more of a standardized version where it's like this is exactly what we're looking for. Instead of it being like if you were to compete in one show one week and one the next, oh, we want you a little bit more toned, and then another one, oh, we want you a little bit more leaned out and stuff. So it's like, or we want you a little bit more fuller. So it's like, yeah, it is something that I think really should be addressed as well. But now we get into my favorite question because if we were to talk to you a year from today, where would you like to be at in your life? Now, again, if we were to have talked to you a year ago today and you would have predicted a global pandemic and all that stuff, I would have bet my entire life savings against it. So it goes to show you that we are not, Nostradamus on this podcast. But in an ideal world, where would you like to be at a year from today when it comes to just your bodybuilding and just your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved?
Yeah. Definitely. So after this long build that I've been through, going and being first call outs at nationals would be a huge goal for me that I would like to take home next year. Um, as far as bodybuilding goes, pretty clean and clear on that front. And personal goals, I just am going through a very healthy, selfish season. So just continuing to develop myself and develop my business. So um, those are my goals here.
That's awesome. Is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
I don't know. That's a big one.
All right. Well, I mean, some people do, some people don't. And believe me, we've had plenty of times where people are like, yeah, no shout out. So, no, it's totally fine. But is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap things up?
No, I'm happy.
All right.
Thank you for having me on here.
Oh, absolutely. And again, you guys, everyone go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to her Instagram page down below. And, buyer beware, we'll inspire you to get in shape and, stop eating all those Twinkies. But again, Caroline, we cannot thank you enough for coming on and sharing your journey. And I mean, we wish you nothing but the best. And I think you're going to do great. And I look forward to having you on a year from now and talking about, all the success you've had. But again, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Well, I got to say, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.